Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today let's make a wet bag. Now, wet bags can be made in any size, and they can be used for almost anything. We can use them for bathing suits in the beach. We can use them for diapers. We can use them for diaper bags. We can use them to put the bottles in. We can use them to put our lunch in. We can use them for traveling, anything that we want to keep what's in the bag dry, or have anything that spills in the bag from coming out of the bag. I have a very simple way of making them. There's no zippers, and the closure is only going to take some strapping. Because wet bags are waterproof, I did choose a fabric from Splash Fabric. Now, Splash Fabric has this fabric you can buy online, and it feels like cotton on the one side, but the other side has this waterproof coating on it. You buy them in 1 yard allotments. There's lots of free patterns online that you can use these with. So you can make lots of different items. But today I'm going to make a reversible wet bag. So I'm going to do it in 2 different colors. This fabric is 58 inches wide, so it will go a long distance. To close this, we are going to need some strapping or some webbing. You can buy it in yards or you can buy it in larger pieces. The closure is going to be done with a belt buckle clip. I like to collect old ones. These are just these plastic clips that you snap together, and that will hold them secure, and we squeeze to take that apart. Because this fabric has this special treating on top of it to make it waterproof, it's important that we do a little bit of work with our sewing machine, but any sewing machine is going to be able to sew this. And we can use any foot. It does not get caught up. But what I would recommend is a heavier needle. You could use a denim needle or these super non-stick needles, 90-14, 116. These are just a little bit bigger because I do like to use a thicker thread. And this is a 40 weight thread from Metler. So that heavier thread will also need the bigger needles. Even though you can use any thread and any needle with these will just make it a little bit stronger. So we need to determine the size of the bag. I'm going to be starting with 4 pieces of fabric that are going to be cut at 14 inches by 17 inches. So that 14 is the top, the 17 is that length. Once you see how this bag's made, you'll know that you're going to be able to put this in any size. So let me get my fabric cut. And we can use our fabric scissors or our rotary cutter. So I have 4 pieces the same size, and I do want to have a flat bottom. So I'm going to be cutting squares out of the corners. I will be cutting 3-inch squares on my corners, which is going to give me a 6-inch flat bottom. So that bag is going to be flat and then come up on the sides. So if you want a smaller bottom, only 4 inches, then you would do 2 inches. Because when these are put together, we have the 2 inches on each side, so that's going to equal a 4-inch. 3 inches will be 6 inches. So to design your own size, you're going to have to decide on the size of the bottom and then do the math moving up. So for my 3-inch, I'm just going to take and draw a 3-inch square right now before I stitch them. I'm going to do the one corner and the second corner. And this is on that smaller 14-inch. So that longer side is going to be the height. And I need to cut this out on all 4 fabrics where I'm going to have the bottom. And because I would not pin in this laminated fabric, I'm going to use some clips. Clip a couple of edges and then cut out all 4 corners at the same time. We will now be able to sew these bags together. So I'm going to put my layers together, right side facing, and clip. We can sew this with any seam allowance that we would like. I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to increase my stitch length. So I'm going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance along that bottom and a 1/2 inch along the sides. And I'm going to do that to both pieces. I will be using my 90-14 and my 40 weight thread in the bobbin and in the top. We do not need to finish off those edges because they will not fray. I would recommend doing a finger pressing or a wood pressing. Open up that seam and I take this wooden turner and I just rub those seams open. It's just going to give it a nice finish when it's done. We can now stitch this side seam together. The easiest way is just take your fingers in those 2 corners, pull, and those seams are going to match. Now we're going to be able to stitch along this edge. Once again, I am going to use those larger stitches and do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once those bottoms have been stitched, turn one bag right side out. And this is the pattern that I'm going to use mostly for the outside. Place my lining inside so both the wrong sides are touching. Open up those seams and match them and clip all the way around. We do not need to put a finish treatment on this edge because it doesn't ravel. So we're going to be able to add our strapping. For this particular bag, you can use 1 yard or the 36 inches. If your bag is a different size, what you're looking for is strapping to go all the way around, and you will need about 3 inches hanging over on each side. It can be a little more, it can be a little less. So that's what we're looking at for the size of strapping. If the strapping is nylon, we can seal off those ends with a little match. Just want to very lightly just run some heat along those edges. And that's going to seal that up. You can see that that flame is not even really touching, it's just going right along the side. And that's just enough to put that heat. It starts to melt those little fibers, and now that will not fray. We will now slip that buckle onto the strap. Just to make sure we don't get this twisted, I do like to keep them together. Put the one end in, just put a clamp to hold it. Make sure this is straight, and put in the other end. We do not need to worry about going through these extra loops. We can for appearance, but we will not be using them because it will be stitched. This strap will now get stitched along that bag. If you'd like, you can do a little stitching to hold those together, but it's really not necessary. We want to take those 2 ends and have them match somewhere along the bag, not on the side seams. So come over a couple inches and clip so that those 2 ends meet. So we're clipping that back fabric, the front fabric, and the strapping together. So lay this bag out flat. We want to have one end come here and the other end over here. So we're going to want an equal amount coming off the sides of the bag. Now continue clipping this webbing, and you're going to clip right till that side seam on that one side. Do a row of stitching from that side seam, just right along the top, right to that side seam, come down, and then go all the way back. So we're stitching that webbing right on top of that bag from side seam to side seam. So we're going to leave this for now. So here's that seam, and it's on both sides. You can see I've stitched all the way around, coming right to that seam, right along that edge. We're going to repeat to the other side. So once that side is done, we're going to lay out that strap, and it does need to be straight. So I want both clips to the side. Clip all 3 layers together, and we're going to do the same stitching. Go along the top, stitch along that seam, come along, and stitch along that seam. So these 2 pieces are going to kind of go together. So just stitch as close as you can when you come to these edges. So we stitch that first side turn it over, stitch the second side, both stopping and starting right there at that seam. Now just to finish it up, have that edge come right to the end. Just do a little square stitch right here along the seam. That's going to keep that together. And do that to both sides. Stitching those little ends closed will just make the handle really nice. And to close this, we're going to fill whatever we want. Just have those sides match and roll. We can get as big or as small as we'd like, and then we put that together. So this is now what we have. If the bag is really full, we'll just need to twist it once and bring those handles together. If you're not concerned about having this closed, we can just close those handles on their own and the bag will stay open. So if we need to hang it up, we can hang it up from here and it stays open. And because we have that nice big 6-inch bottom, we now have about a 9-inch bag inside. And if we want to reverse that bag, we're just going to roll that top strap so that it's facing the outside. And that way we can do that roll and lock it together. The splash fabric is a lot of fun to work with. I'll put a link in the description, and you can also buy products that are already made from that splash fabric. Aprons, bags, and little accessories. So you can sew your own or get some things already made for you. Sewing this laminated fabric is really easy. Any machine can do it, but I would recommend investing in the non-stick needles. This fabric is laminated and this goes through really easy. And you can use these for many other projects. I now have a wet bag that I can use for anything that I want to keep wet or dry. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter, all under Sew Very Easy. I'll put a link in the description for you. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.